First of all, good evening, and thank you for coming out. And we have some nice warm weather anyway, and it wasn't heavy rains, because the other thing I thought was, it's nice for it to be warm, but I hope it's not going to be a thunder shower. This show is almost in two sections. I try to have it merge so that it melts together, but around the edge of the wall are some portraits of historical figures, black historical figures, that were part and parcel of presentations I did for monumental pieces that had to go up. And this is sort of my research. So whether it's a black baseball player, or infantryman, or Cato here, or Tugman, and so on, I'll just immerse myself in the imagery, in the face, the character, and also, try to get a sense of who they were and what they had to go through in order to arrive at however I'm going to make a statement. So that's the outside part. The few figures that are around the peripheral edge as well. Here is the Frederick Douglass, and this is Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, and that's on Westchester's campus. And he is, I guess he all in all is almost 8 feet tall. When on the podium he's probably closer to 11 feet tall. But I used to, as a prof at Westchester University, hear my students bitch back and forth about cafeteria food and this and that in the dormitory room, and and I'm going like, that's luxury. When I went over to the cafeteria, I couldn't believe it. It was better than Haunted Hearts used to be when I was a kid. It was like so many different selections. So I thought that what they needed, aside from just this being a celebration of Douglass's life, is to look at an image of a person approximately their age who had to really face some hardships and overcome. So this was Douglass as a very young man, and I wanted to imply stepping into the future, moving, but of course sculpture is frozen, so we have to sort of pick and choose how we're going to do that. And he was quite a bit of a fashion bug. He was very conscious of how he looked and how he presented himself and his image and so on. And so I wanted to make sure that I paid him due credit in that sense. And to me, he was just such a handsome guy. Head of hair that was like a lion's mane. And I try to keep those kind of images in my mind as I move through it. Feedback that I would get sometimes is that he had the whip wrapped around him. The master had just, and I'm going, well, once it's put up, people do with it what they will. But the imagery when I was working in is a very, very old, symbolic set of images that goes way back pre-Grecian times, and you'll see slaves sort of depicted, and they'll have bondage as a rope around them, and in this case he's freed himself, so this rope is broken, and in his left hand, and I have to check that out because I wrote something the other day and realized that it's a wrong hand, but in his left hand he has a cane, and that cane is President Lincoln's cane. The two of them sometimes were opposite corners. Lincoln, foremost, was about saving the Union and preserving the integrity of the Union. Douglass, on the other hand, was saying, if you were a slave, then your priorities would be different. But the dialogue that they had was probably, I think, some of the greatest debates on the highest level. It's too bad we're not having those debates still, with that kind of skill. And I thought that, it's not that they're just good speakers, and I heard that about Obama. No, it's not just being able to turn a word, it's being able to think clearly and then come up with words that are appropriate. And Douglass was a wonderful orator and a brilliant thinker, and I wanted just to portray some of that. Yeah, so that's Douglas. This was an image that went out to California, the MLK, and that was a preliminary partial study. His finger would go all the way down to the floor and changed quite a bit. Actually, that was a head over there that went on him, the white head that's there. So you can see it changed an awful lot. And he was holding a nude female baby, and I didn't think much about it at the time, except that my entire work is about females. So I had a choice, male, female, whatever, and I decided on the female. And I remember distinctly getting a call back, and I wasn't there. And on the answering service was the committee making a decision about the monument that was going to go in, and they wanted to talk to me. And I go, well, I don't know how I'm feeling about the day that I want to deal with this right now. And then it hit me, well, I seldom ever get a call back when they're going to be out. They just say, sorry, that's it, and so on. So I got in touch with the committee, and they had some questions about not Martin Luther King, not so much his robes, but the child being a female. And I was going, well, this is generational, I guess. Because when I was a kid, naked babies were a big deal. They're supposed to be naked. But I do remember, as I started moving up, maybe pre-teen, where you could not take certain photographs to, at that time it would be the neighborhood drugstore, where you got a process, because they almost saw that as child pornography. And I was going to go, what? So nudity, as far as a baby was concerned, was different. And I was saying, well, that's not the message here. But the message being that King was holding the future generations. So that child was meant to be the future generations. And everything I've heard in his messages, that's what it was about. It was about the future, He already knew what his past was like. And this one, in a sense, over here, which went outside of New York, this is at the Riverwalk in New Jersey, Fairleigh Dickinson University. This is almost about the same thing. I decided to take the point of King's speech where he says, I've been to the mountain, with the implication he's been to the mountain, he's seen over the other side, but he's never going to get there. So, same kind of thing, rough rock, just to be symbolic of the edge of this mountain, and again his clerical robes. And here, what I do is, I'm not trying to be academically, historically correct. I'll merge his academic robes along with his theological robes. And I get feedback on that, especially with academic institutions. So I ended up having to acquiesce and put a couple of bars on his sleeve to represent that he was a doctor of theology. And I'm going, well, okay, I can, if that's what it takes, I can do that. And again, going way back in history, the scroll was not only a sign of wisdom and knowledge, but it was also a sign of the barrier carrying that knowledge. So that's basically what the scrolls are about. And I think that's about it for him. And he was even bigger than Mr. Douglas. So he was pretty sizable once he was set into place. Now, the pieces in the central part of the floor are actually my main focus, and I call them third world women, and I try to explain that they're not necessarily about a geographical section of the world. They're about every place in the world, because we have sections all over the world, despite how affluent the country is, that where we have a third world conditions. And when I say third world, I'm talking about where they work for too little money, where they're really kind of tired, where the matriarchal is, regardless of how the name comes down, it's almost a mother who carries the burden of the family. So this is a charwoman. I remember seeing images in Brazil of people working the diamond mines, carrying sacks on their back, climbing these makeshift ladders, and hoping like hell that they might strike and find just a little piece of stone that's worth something. But they literally were. They reminded me when I was a kid of Flash Gordon's cave people, where they sort of just came out of the sides of the wall. And I thought, I wanted to depict her as, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, as a very strong, healthy, but absolutely tired, exhausted woman. That's mom at the end of the day, and you don't want to mess with her. Plenty of space. Actually, when I was doing that and I was trying to figure out the composition and so on, I thought in terms of sacks of potatoes and sandbags building a wall, that kind of compression where things find their own weight and begin to settle down and so on. So, you know, anatomically, can it happen? Well, part of it can, but the other part of it is, it doesn't happen without a great deal of pain. And her sister over here, the same, contorted in on herself and so on. And again, a different statement, but similar in a lot of ways. And again, they're not bitching and complaining about their condition. They're enduring it and persevering on because they're strong. You know, they can see beyond that. And here was a different statement. And I was talking about that earlier. I saw her as Lazaria, the female of Lazarus, rising back up from the dead. And she actually was turned this way with the movement going this way and handles coming out. And I decided that that's really not the statement I was trying to make. And again, I was influenced, and I'm so ashamed that I can't remember the artist's name, because I would love to be able to give accurate credit to it. But it was a Mexican female photographer. I think it was Raba. But and she had some beautiful image of native kids with iguanas, fish, and so on. And there was kind of a rawness and a repulsive quality only because of the way that we look at things that aren't us. And I decided, you know, that's what I want. I want a primavera. I want the beginning of spring, and I want life to begin. And that's the passion fruit that's sitting all over. This one is a fairly easy one. This is Rosa Parks. This was for the Statuary Hall of Fame in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, with all the security just to get the sketch down there and do the presentation, and we had to go through tunnels and show ID and so on, I couldn't believe the newsreels when I saw it. I was still trying to, because I came in the middle of it, and I'm going, what? It looks like the Capitol. What is that? A very different statuary hall than I knew, where people are just going through like mayhem through the middle of it. But this is Rosa Parks, and my version of her was regal, because as I went through the halls, first of all, the halls are just majestic, and everyone in there is raised to a different platform, and it was clear that they wanted Rosa on a park bench. And I'm sorry, not a park bench, but on a bus seat. And my feeling was that that's nitpicking. That was the incident that she chose to bring this whole thing to the Supreme Court, but that's not what it was about. And to a lot, she was the mother of the civil rights movement. Not the only one, but she was a middle-class woman, you know, light-skinned, well-bred, had a job, you know, no illegal kids. You know, she was the one to bring this thing to the Supreme Court, because there were many before. I mean, everyone, you know, who wasn't really white got sent to the back of the bus. That was the long and the short of it. And many who refused to go. But she was the one, for whatever reason, that was able to get it to the point where the Supreme Court had to hear the case and everything sort of got overturned. So I created a chair out of federal symbols, the fluting, the armrest, and so on, but it's a three-legged chair. And Rosa, of course, with her beads, and her Bible, because she was a very religious person. And of course, again, that part of the civil rights movement was heavily based on the Christian movement, even though the church had left them in many times alone. But she's seated, and her foot, that is her left foot is resting lightly on a book. And I had in the proposal that this is a book of the Constitutional Book of Law, because this entire movement was to gain legitimacy through the court system so that this whole thing would stop. But I also said in big letters, of course, as legislators, you know, there's no such thing as a constitutional book of law. We have a constitution, period. But that was enough where they thought that was setting a wrong example, that it was almost, unpatriotic. So, and my feeling is they just didn't want to see Rosa, you know, presented in the same way that everybody else was. They wanted to see her on a bus seat, you know. So, and I have no problems with that. But again, that was not my version, you know. So we go on from there. And I have to say, I lose many more than I ever get. And most times I'm kind of comfortable with that. Not comfortable, but you know, so be it. My feeling is, you know, it's already written. What will happen, and if it doesn't, so be it. But John, in a minute, you're flagging me on to get on.
Well, I wouldn't have time for questions.
In a minute. And this one, importantly, is my brother. And that was when we were both kids. And I started a series of daycare centers way back when through the Quaker organization that was set up for originally itinerant Irish when they were getting off the ships and had no place to go. And then as the neighborhood changed and became black, they had these buildings. And what do we do with them now? And so, and there was some federal funding. It seemed like it was moving in a different direction. So we set up preschool with breakfast programs, tutorial programs, and so on. And in between the kids coming in, I would use one of the gyms. My brother had just gotten back from Vietnam, and he would sit and I would model him because, you know, I longed for sculpture again. I had abandoned it. I had thought it doesn't have anything to do with what's really important in work. And then I found out a few years later, what makes it important is I need it. You know, that's who I am. So, questions, I'm sorry.
May I ask a question about the figure right in front of you? The figure that's sitting in the chair there with
my favorite. My favorite. Yes.
Repeat the question, please.
I'm sorry,
I
what?
just wanted to know more about this.
I think the question is about the woman in a folding chair. I have a fixation with chairs. I love them. And you can go back 3,000 years and you'll find there's so much similarity, but they have the same problem. You know, we all have to get our butts kind of comfortable, our backs and so on, you have to sit, and not all of us are you know, such that we can just sit on the pillow and last there for a while. So she's on just a very typical folding chair, but I wanted to give her the raw feeling that I get from African art and pre-Columbian. I wanted her just to be sheer power. I wanted her to be grandma, the stare that freezes you. So she's sitting there, and I chose a position after moving her around on many positions. I wanted to make sure she was not ladylike, that she was a woman, and that she had unapologized power in her hands, her shoulders, and so on. And I remember seeing a documentary, I think it was in Colombia or Brazil, and it had to do with the Black Panther. And as this thing is sitting there, its tail, the only thing moved was its tail in this very sort of sensuous kind of way, and it sat there casually hanging over the branch with its paw, and you knew any minute it was electric. Mess with it if you would. The size didn't matter. It was one of the smallest cats there, and nobody else told them that. And I wanted her to have that kind of spiritual thing. So, yes, yeah.
This isn't really a question, but can I say a feeling that I have about, especially the women, that you depict them with strength, elegance, and vulnerability all at the same time. And so their fear or their angst becomes strength. And they have an elegance that is amazing, including your figures that are turned and holding on, even though they look, there's an element of strength that's overwhelming.
Well, thank you. I get a lot from criticism, from hearing other people's comments on it, because it's a perspective that is like a gift to me. It's an outside view of how people are taking information in. I remember smoking joints and drinking beers with a very good friend of mine, and he would say certain things that would almost lead to an argument. And he was saying, yeah, you think you would have questioned how come all of your women are kind of like down and not standing up, and are you a formalist, or are you this, or you that, and so on. And of course the first thing is to defend yourself, and then the second thing for the years to come that haunts you is the elements that might be true that are there. And I had decided, like, first of all, I love the natural world, and animals to me are secondary. So anyone who knows animals knows that because they're on their side or because they're on their back doesn't mean that they're down. That they can defend themselves from whatever position, and so on. And that's the way it is here. And the hooded eyes, someone had also said that a lot of them have hooded eyes and so on. Well, I'm much more interested in the internal and the sense of being circumspective and processing than I am into animating them in such a tremendous gesture. I think there's a power in quietness sometimes. So.
I have a question. Well, to actually follow up, because that your previous statement kind of speaks my mind on this, but this figure in particular is womb-like to me, and I don't know if that was something that you were informed by or just coincidentally it's happened, but the power of the womb is.
Okay.
Really,
I thought you said
and
womb-like.
her in form itself.
Okay, yeah, perhaps, maybe. I mean, most of what I say comes out after the fact. I mean, beforehand, I'm just a fit of confusion. I'm just watching things happen and sort of responding to it, and hopefully there'll be a little bit of excitement that happens. What I find is that if I follow my natural inclination, there's a tendency for it to get too cosmetically pretty, and I can enjoy that for a while. I mean, especially all of us guys enjoy that, and I think the women too. But at some point I go, okay, no, I have to remember who I am, what my mission is, and I start contorting and bending and this and that and so on, And until I hit a point of awkwardness, and then I work from that awkwardness back into a kind of harmony. And I see them almost like this dance movement. So these figures will start in many, many different positions before they end up arriving to where they are. I'm looking for something that I can resonate with. And I have to say that while I had a very traditional art background, and that was heavily based on skill, and I'm indebted to that. But I have a lot of African sculptures I keep around, and I do that to keep in touch, because there is no subtlety that they're using. There is no, they almost hit you over the head with what's being said. And I go, okay, if that can stand up next to that, then you're fine. So it's kind of a touchstone as far as I'm concerned. But I think all art is that way.
I had a little epiphany earlier when you were talking about these three figures and their power, and I'm just looking at the images, and I think, being as I get older and a little unsteady or something, I've just recently heard that it's all about your feet. And with these three figures, the feet in them are incredible. The feet are almost like the source of the power, between them and the ground. And I was just trying to imagine any of these feet trying to squeeze into a Manolo Blahnik.
Well, any Aborigine foot does not go into a shoe. That foot has been molded by the ground that it walks on, and spreads out all over the place and so on. And it's only since we start putting shoes on that foot has changed so much. And interesting enough, when I used to study the classical stuff with the sculptures back 2,000 years ago, you'll see a spread in between the big toe and the first toe. And a lot of that is due to the fact that they wore sandals. And that's where that sandal strap came in. So, we are made and altered, by our garment as well as our attitudes and our culture. But if I wasn't so strapped with frames being so expensive, I had a half a dozen big studies of feet and hands, because that is my meat and potatoes. They're the kind of thing that I was saying to someone, it's like sometimes I resonate with musicians more than I do with visual artists, because they understand that going through a passage over and over again and over and over again, and each time it's slightly different, and you're looking for your voice, and you're learning something as you're doing it, and it never gets old. So hands, feet, and again, my teacher's voice, and they were saying, Dick, good amateur is 97% of what the professional is. The professional's got that other 3%, which is all those areas that are difficult to do. Behind the ears, the elbows, behind this and so on and so on. I used to keep, yeah. You work on your weaknesses. And by the way, they're still my weaknesses. It's just that I have to forget that they are. So as I start working, I have no memory, but it begins to come back, and the familiar starts, because I think the creative energy is I know it's on a whole different level, and it's sometimes antagonistic to logic. Logic is, is focusing at a point and a straight line. And creativity, I used to say to my students, it's more like fireworks. Goes off in every conceivable direction, and each one is a possibility. Each one to me is a what if. What if I do this? What if I did that? What if I did this? Whatever. So, again. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.